the I could say that my name is Charlie Palmer, and I own and run BAD. Started it 10 years ago, and Jason was our sales director. He's also been with us for about 3 months, and Peter's done some seminar work with us, helped to train our staff on AI, and helped to open my eyes to AI and the empowerment it provides in the office in an everyday environment. So I'm keen to project that out to the wider world. And I think you can introduce yourself and your various qualifications, Dr. Peter.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully that's shared. You can see a slide, hopefully. Introduction to AI and machine learning.
Yeah, got it.
Brilliant. So yeah, today's probably 50 minutes or so will be on this topic, introduction to AI and machine learning. And we're going to have, I think, quite a few more talks that build on this one throughout the year. So this is really just getting those foundations, getting those definitions, and getting us going really with how we can use AI. As Charlie said, my name's Peter Baksh. I work with this company, or I'm a co-owner of AIDataCert.com, and I also work as training corporate clients. I've been doing it for the last 3-4 years in data science, machine learning and AI. Prior to that, I worked actually in the defense industry, looking at current sort of military challenges and can we actually apply machine learning and AI to those, and that was both in sort of private and public sector defense. So that's where I learned my craft, and then effectively I've been training ever since. Let's get on to what we're gonna the future talks I mentioned. So over I think the next 6 months or so, we'll start off with today's talk, really laying the foundations, so introduction to this AI and machine learning. Next talk, I think we'll have a look at these large language model platforms that we will definitely be clear on today, what features they have, because they're adding lots of tools. They can do lots of things now that they couldn't do about 2 years ago. And it's not well advertised really what they can do, and they can be used for a variety of things. So we'll be looking at the features they have and then actually going through some practical use cases. These bits of software aren't designed to do specific things, so sometimes you have to think creatively to actually make best use of them. I think probably the 4th workshop in, we'll actually have a look at some enterprise AI options. So hopefully after the first 3 workshops or webinars, you've become a bit more excited about the capability of AI and now maybe want to bring it into your enterprise workflow. So we'll have a look at how you can do that. We'll then have a look at what these things AI agents are. In AI, that's kind of been the word of 2025. What is an agent? What can it do? And we also may sort of give you a broad understanding on how you could deploy custom AI in your business. So maybe you thought, oh yes, there's loads of opportunity here. I've gone for an enterprise option, and now actually is there some AI that I may want to deploy as part of my business? And then the last 2 webinars, we may actually have a look at how you can specifically bring AI into your workforce. With any technological change, it isn't just saying, look, here's a license, go and use it. There are workflows that you already have in place. People have their preferences and things like that. So we're actually going to have a look at how you can bring everyone and actually get everyone, all of your staff and your team using it safely and efficiently to make the best use of it. Now, today, we will have a look at really definitions. What is AI and machine learning? What is this word generative AI that is being thrown around a lot? I will try at a high level to give you an intuition at actually how does generative AI work and how do these large language models work. We will make sure that everyone knows how to access an AI tool and find out if you've been using them already. And then we will actually have a look at just a couple of problems together. So that's what's coming up. Throughout all of this talk, there will be pauses for questions, but actually, if you've got a question that just arises as I'm talking, just ask it, to be honest. If you want to put your hand up, if you want to write it in the chat, that's fine. But if you want to come off mute, equally, that's fine as well. Okay. So let's have a look at some definitions to start with so that we can communicate effectively almost in the language of this domain. So when we talk about AI, artificial intelligence, we're talking really about anything that tries to replicate what we consider as human intelligence. So that is something that has the properties of reasoning, self-correction, and learning. The definition itself, artificial intelligence, doesn't really tell you how to go about getting it. It just says anything that's trying to effectively simulate human intelligence. Now, where the field has gone to achieve artificial intelligence is it's looked to use this thing called machine learning. Now, machine learning is a definition for a huge family of algorithms that effectively try to be intelligent by looking at past historical data or generating new data. So they're effectively trying to create their own rules for a problem by investigating data. So that's machine learning. It's trying to achieve some form of artificial intelligence by using data. Now, deep learning, so if we've got ML as effectively a category of AI, then deep learning refers to a family of algorithms, very, very large, complicated algorithms that, broadly speaking, try to replicate how the human brain works in terms of they've got loads of these neuron connections all connected together. Sometimes they've got billions, even trillions of connections in order to try to achieve some of the tasks that we want them to achieve. So deep learning is really a family of machine learning algorithms that are very big and complicated and try to sort of simulate how a human brain may work. And I do emphasize try, they're nowhere near as efficient as human brain. And then within deep learning, we've got this thing, Gen AI or generative AI. Now, these are AI systems or algorithms that actually try to generate more than just a number or a label. They actually generate full images, big paragraphs of text. They're actually generating significantly more than previous machine learning solutions that effectively just said, what I predict is yes or no, or what I predict is the stock price will be 20. What I'm saying about this image is it's an image of a cat. These are algorithms that give a far richer amount of information. Okay. And then within generative AI, one of the key families of algorithms is these things, LLMs, large language models. These are deep learning algorithms that have been trained on a vast amount of text data. And in doing so, they have a reasonable understanding on how human language works. Okay, so these are sort of probably the four key bits of terminology that are often sort of interwoven together, and people who aren't in the domain often just use them sort of interchangeably. And hopefully now you've got a bit more of an idea of the differences. Okay. Now, AI in the real world. AI has been around for a long time. Algorithms were being talked about until the 1950s or so, and we saw a lot of AI through the 2000s, and it was AI doing the kind of tasks I have on the screen. So we had investment AIs that were trying to predict what was going on the stock market, looking at historical data and trying to predict if certain assets would go up or down. Fraud detection. We were having banks that were having a look at your past transaction behavior. Like typically you seem to spend between, I don't know, $50 and $300 in one transaction. Typically it was in Western Europe. And therefore, when you had a weird transaction come out of Thailand, the machine learning algorithm had learned that you typically do not spend out of Thailand. You typically do not spend 20,000 in one transaction. Therefore, we will flag that up as a potential fraudulent transaction. Your smartphones, this is prior to 2020, were loaded with AI. Just think of things like predictive text. That was a machine learning algorithm. Google Maps, we've had around for years, looking at lots of historical routes and trying to therefore predict the best route for you to take on your journey. Credit scoring, so trying to predict and calculate your credit scoring risk, things like that. those were all being done or partly done by machine learning and AI algorithms. Lots of AI was in healthcare. Think of images. You had doctors. There was a lot of radiography algorithms going on, trying to predict if you had breast cancer or not from certain images. AI has been everywhere for a long, long time. However, I said AI was everywhere for a long time. It is now very much everywhere. AI was prevalent, definitely about 10 years ago, but now it is everywhere. And what really changed, there was a moment in late 2022 where ChatGPT was released to the general public. And this was kind of the first time that really the public, non-data scientists, non-data engineers had a chance to really work with AI technology and also begin creating their own AIs. So why was that? Well, these things like ChatGPT, they were very conversational in design. You didn't have to know any programming language to be able to interact with it. Whereas previously AI and machine learning, you needed a bit of code often to get things working. Whereas effectively the conversational language that we use, English, is effective for communicating with these style of algorithms. So very quickly, ChatGPT, I think, hit 100 million users in about 2 months. And now we're seeing, I think, over 1 billion users a month at the moment. It was free. So you've got the most powerful AI algorithm in the world, far more powerful than anything that the government can produce, anything that really NASA were using. And suddenly you can have access to it for free. So obviously there was a lot more interest and a lot more uptake. It actually tackled some useful day-to-day tasks. So a lot of these AI algorithms, maybe it was a chess bot, brilliant at playing chess. Maybe it was something that was just going to predict asset management. But now you've got these models that can do a huge variety of complicated tasks. They can summarize text data, they can plan your meal, they can book stuff in your Outlook calendar. So they're doing a vast amount of actually useful tasks. We've then began to have enterprise get on board. That was probably in 2024. And actually, a lot of these platforms started to offer the protections, that's the security protections in their software and their platforms that business would be requiring. And it wasn't the case that in 2023 or late 2022, an algorithm was produced and it stood still. The models are getting exponentially more intelligent, exponentially better. And therefore, we're all using them a lot more because they're just getting better and better at our tasks. And I think really it all comes down to this AI accessibility. Anyone can be using ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude without any prior knowledge of computer science, of data. They can do amazing things with it. And actually, to the extent you can begin actually designing your own AI tools with actually very little knowledge of AI itself. So initially, especially for small and medium enterprises, if you wanted to use an AI in your organization, you would need at least a data scientist or a data engineer. Whereas now you can actually, to a certain extent, achieve a lot with very little knowledge of data and IT systems. Okay. Now, what are the kind of platforms that generative AI we have access to? So it started off, these large language models or generative AI was generally text to text. You put text in, a question, a big document, and you got text out. And all of our major platforms, we've got Google Gemini, OpenAI, ChatGPT, Anthropic, Claude, they all did this. But we also have models that do text to image. So you can write a prompt and it will generate a nice image. Ones that specialize in that are companies like Midjourney and a Chinese company, Kling, that does great text to video. And in fact, actually, I think it was last month, we had a film producer produce an advert for the NBA finals in America. This is an advert that usually has a budget of about 5 to 10 million. He used Gemini, so Google's text to video model to produce a $5 million advert within 2 days. So the quality of these generative AI algorithms is very, very good. You can generate audio from text. So this could be that you just effectively write something down and you will have maybe an avatar say it in probably some American or English accent, but equally you can have them generate whole pieces of music as well for you. And we've already talked about generating that video from text. So that is our generative AI scene. I'd be interested, we've got 15 people in the chat. In the chat function of this Teams call, would you mind just writing down some platforms that you have had experience of in using? I've mentioned a few, ChatGPT, Gemini. I'd be interested what else people are using. Brilliant, Copilot. Charlie's got the European representative in there, Mistral from France. That's very good. Grok, yes, if we want something that can have a look at some real-time data, maybe from Twitter or X, Grok's very good. What's got? More ChatGPT, a lot of Claude. Has anyone used any of the Chinese models? So DeepSeek or Quen from Alibaba?
Are you saying we should have we should be using more than one? It's hard enough to get your head around what one does, if you know what I mean, on an everyday basis. Should we have 2 or 3? You'd suggest?
Well, so they can be. The more you use them, they can be subtly better for different things. And also, if you use some on like a free license, other on a paid-for license, you may run out of usage on one and then move over to the other. But I'm just curious what everyone's using. And actually, we have got Lovable. We've got some people developing AI apps or actual websites. Brilliant. It's good. This is a lot more than what we got this time last year, Charlie. So people are really getting involved in these things. Good. Okay. Let's I want to give you probably the next 5-7 minutes or so an understanding as to how these large language models work. Now, it's not going to be linear algebra or any maths, just an intuition, because it does actually help when you begin to interact with them, understanding sometimes their behavior. So large language models, these are the models that work with our text data, our input text and our output text, and they also kind of direct our image and our video generation models. These models were developed by effectively ingesting most of the freely available data on the internet, and also many of them are in court for potentially not freely available data as well. So they've basically looked to try to get as much data as they can, and they fed this data into very large, very clever algorithms, and they've had to use huge computers, big data centers to ingest all of this data through their huge algorithms. And what are these algorithms trying to do? Well, simply speaking, they're trying to look at all of this text data and try to predict the next word in sequences. And they do this again and again and again. Now let's get a feel for how that could work. So if there was a bit of text data that it ingested in near the beginning of a training run, and it was the tank was under attack and they fired back with there. And the algorithm's goal is to look at sequences of text and predict the next word. Now, right at the beginning of the training run, the algorithm doesn't really have much of an understanding of words or language at all. So it is likely to completely come up with a suggestion for the next word that is ridiculous. I think there's probably about 20,000-ish words in the human language. So thinking of probabilities, it's probably got 1 in 20,000 chance of putting a suitable word in there. Now, as the training run progresses, it will see these sequences and try to predict the next word. And it gradually works out that it has to understand the context of language. So it has to understand really what a tank is. And it understands that a tank possibly with the word attack near it, is going to be something to do with military and the pressurized situation. If there was other words in this sentence to do with maybe half full, then the algorithm is learning that actually that tank is more likely to be something like a tank of petrol, something like that. So as they go through the training runs, they constantly try to predict the next word, and the algorithm feeds back on if that was probably a suitable next word based on what actually was there. And after billions and billions of times, the algorithm, in order to achieve this task, actually begins to learn what language means. So it begins to learn what a tank is, it begins to learn what attack is, and it begins to learn actually what are the options of firing back with, so that probably if you told ChatGPT to complete this sentence, it would say fire back with their gun or their weapon or their tank. Okay, so all these things are at a basic level is next word prediction machines, but don't let that sort of simplicity make you feel like they're not intelligent, because actually predicting the next word does require quite an advanced understanding of language and words. Now, the context is very important in order to try to predict the next word for these models. If you just had the sentence that you wanted to complete, the client was, you have a whole vast array of words that could possibly fit in there. The client was happy, the client was sad, the client was rich, the client was poor, loads and loads of words. Okay. Now, with these algorithms, context is very important. So if we added some context to the client was, so added some things before that, we get the portfolio was down by 50% and the client was, the distribution of words, the possibilities of words that could come afterwards, is going to be significantly less than when we just said the client was. So if we could, any suggestions for what, from anyone's experience, what would be a suitable next word here?
Suing his financial advisor.
So yeah, something like that. Yeah, suing, angry. We're going to end up with a collection of negative words. So context with these models is very important in order to get what you want out of them, or what is going to be most likely appropriate out of them. Okay. Now, basis of these models next word prediction, and that is still quite an intelligent thing to do. Just for your understanding, it not just next word prediction happened in these models. So if you ask the model that was just trained on next word prediction, what number do I call in an emergency? The algorithm would likely give, if you ran it many, many times, these possible responses: 911, call 999 or 112 in the UK, emergency numbers vary, contact the local authorities. Okay, those are all plausible from ingesting all of the data on the internet and making a prediction, the next sequence of words. However, during the development of these algorithms, we actually had humans, a lot of them were based in Kenya actually, have a look at the suggestions and order them as to what seemed to be most appropriate for our human preferences and suitability. Okay, so not all of these actually, I think, are equally useful. For instance, contact the local authorities, I don't think is actually that useful. Potentially 911 could be a bit dangerous if that isn't, if you aren't aware that that doesn't work in certain regions. Possibly emergency numbers vary, where are you, could be a helpful response. So what happened once the next word predictions had sort of been the basis of the algorithm is they went through this reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is effectively humans spent about 4 years tweaking these algorithms to our own preferences. And what that did was it also protected us from nasty material. So hopefully these algorithms, if you ask for how to make a bomb or something, it should decline that. and it also should give us more human sounding responses. And this is basically how it works. The original next word prediction model drafted a load of responses. A human reviewed it like we did and put them in a sequence of orders, or what best to worst. Then the AI system tried to learn actually our preferences, and it tweaked the model due to our preferences, and that cycle repeated lots and lots and lots. And that is how we got to the large language models that we work with today. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some high level background as to how these models have become intelligent. So there's a lot of information there. So I just want to pause. Any questions on how these models work?
Am I right in understanding that the human intervention in the early stages has therefore given the tool much more emphasis on how it then learns or and constructs its responses later on? Is that right?
Yes, well, basically most of the internet is actually garbage. So what they found just with the next word prediction is it could give some really terrible answers and also some quite disturbing answers. And actually, these labelers, often in sort of third world countries, a lot of them actually had to go into some form of therapy afterwards because of having to correct the complete rubbish the models were coming out with. So it was sort of just trying to steer them in the right direction that is more aligned with how we communicate. Does that answer your question, or do you want to come back at that?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Because after it's been trained first time around, then the third thing on your thing said the system repeats and fine-tune, the model fine-tunes. It fine-tunes itself. Is that
yes.
right?
Yeah. So now we don't have that much. There's some of it still goes on, but nowhere near the amount that was happening in around 2019, 2020. Now the models actually within themselves can sort of decide actually that isn't very human sounding, update yourself. So we don't have
just like a gyroscope. You set it up and then off it goes.
Yeah, you've effectively got a large language model, and you have a model now sort of judging how good the other model was in order to get better. And that's why it doesn't take huge amounts of time now to develop next generation models. But the first ones needed this human sort of correction mechanism. And therefore they can be done as well to some degree a lot cheaper. Okay. What do we have? So we've got a general purpose generative AI platforms. I call them general purpose because they can do lots of things. They can probably generate images. They can maybe take in various file formats, maybe Excel, maybe CSV. They can output text for us. They can create images for us. They may be able to create certain file formats for us. Now, the common ones that we have, a lot of you have already put in the chat. We've got here on the left, that's Grok. So that's Elon Musk's one. We've got DeepSeek up here. That's the one in China that disturbed the US stock market for a few days. Anthropic Claude, one out of Silicon Valley, a very popular one for programmers. ChatGPT, probably the first mover, the most well-known one. Gemini, top right. Google, a very, very capable AI, and I think it's embedded now in all Android devices. And then we also have our platforms. So this is Perplexity, which is a bit like an AI Google search. It doesn't actually, they haven't generated the model. They use other people's models, but they do other clever things with it, scraping the internet and whatnot, in order to do actually quite intelligent searches for you. So they're a pretty good model. And things like Microsoft Copilot, I saw mentioned in the chat, that is not an AI model in itself. Microsoft Copilot actually use a lot of ChatGPT's models, but they've integrated it into that Microsoft 365 environment And so that is a pretty popular AI platform, especially in enterprise. Now, how do you go about accessing these platforms? Clearly, a lot of you already have, given what's gone on in the chat. Pretty much all of the platforms offer a free basic service. Most platforms will offer a reasonable service after you've registered. Some you don't even have to register anymore. If you pay for a license, usually there's like an individual license is around £20 per month is the ballpark figure. What you get for those licenses is usually slightly more security, or some security at least, higher usage and access to better features and models. If you then go up the scale, most platforms now, the big ones, are offering these plus licenses or max licenses, and actually they're looking at about £200 a month. These are access now to the very biggest, latest models. They will offer usually unlimited or very high usage, but that's a common plan that I think OpenAI, so ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude both have. And then some of these platforms as well offer enterprise licenses. What do you get there? Usually the key is security. They try to add some guarantees that your data is not going to be going anywhere that you don't want it to, and they will try not to look at the data. Is generally what you get there. So that's how we go about accessing these platforms. I'm curious, with the audience that we have, what you would put yourself into in terms of, if you just literally put a letter in the chat, have you never used one of these platforms before? The data suggests there's still a section of society that hasn't. Have you used the platform without registering for it, in terms of you're quite concerned, you don't want to give your details? You've used the platform, but you're actually registered it, you pay for it, or you have a full-on enterprise license? It's quite. So we've got some people paying. BB, CD, BB. Looks like most people are BB or C. We've only got 2 people who actually want to pay for these things. Okay. And no one seems to be working with companies that actually have an enterprise license, and that's interesting. Okay. Let's see by the end of these talks if that changes at all. Now, let's say you've managed to access these platforms, and we will just access ChatGPT in a second. When you access the platform, the way to interact with an AI is called prompting. Now, prompting, we've really been doing it for years with Google. It's effectively just asking a technology to do something. And we've all Googled, like, what is the weather going to be like tomorrow? That is also a prompt. The difference between prompting with Google and prompting an AI is that you can give an AI a huge question with a load of background information. In fact, most of these AIs will support hundreds of thousands of words of information. And often, how you design your question and the context of information you give it strongly dictates the quality of what you get out of it, and does what you get out of it actually meet your needs? So the art of asking a question and giving it the right context is effectively known as prompting. And this is where this prompt engineering term came out, is someone who is effectively skilled in asking the right question to the AI to get the right output. Okay, now 2023, huge salaries were being advertised for prompt engineers. Now the AIs are actually pretty good at understanding what we want, and I don't think there are that many of these prompt engineering jobs around anymore. So let's have a look at maybe a reasonable prompt. Let's say the question that you actually may have asked Google was, I need assistance in developing a client communication strategy. That's pretty much what you would put into Google. But if you're giving it to an AI, I would encourage you to give it some background context. So actually a little bit about you. So maybe you're an IFA and you're looking to enhance your communication strategy. You talk about your goal. You want to provide regular updates. I've given a paragraph. You may have a page, you may have 2 pages. The more detail you give, the more the AI may be able to tailor its answer for specific to you. Now, provide the clear instructions will be the next step really after the context. So what is it that you really want to happen? So in this case, I want an effective communication strategy. I want the recommended frequency and type of communication for each segment, and I want content ideas and themes for regular updates. So you can really be quite clear in your instructions and actually describe how you want it output. If you don't describe the desired output, you may get paragraph worth of text to trawl through. So in my case, I'm going to say identify the key client segments. I want for each client, I want a communication strategy, a frequency, and a type of communication, and content ideas. You will then get an answer back. And then I would always suggest that you iterate on that response. The single answer that you get back the first time is unlikely to be the best one. You will then sort of tune it. You'll say, oh, I like this bit, but actually I want more detail on this. And if you're asking anything that is actually requiring some facts, the LLM to actually be giving you facts, I would suggest that you check those facts at least early on before you get an intuition on what is likely to be wrong and right, because these things can make mistakes. So let's actually now, actually I'll pause for a question and then we're just going to have a look at a basic prompt in ChatGPT. But are there any questions on this prompting thing? Okay, brilliant. Let's try a prompt. Hopefully I have, there we go, ChatGPT up. And let me actually, I probably got that prompt on another screen. There we go. So this is what my ChatGPT looks like. If you're completely new to these platforms, just go to chatgpt.com and you should, I think, be able to use it without registering. Now, you won't have access to all these various models. It will just say ChatGPT up there and you get put, I think, on their cheapest model. But the platform will look very the same. In the Ask Anything is literally where you oh gosh, I didn't mean to press enter there. Oh, odd. What have I pressed? Let's just refresh that. Okay, so I have now just pasted in that prompt that I went through on the PowerPoint. So I'm an independent financial advisor. It is using this 4.0 model, which is pretty intelligent, pretty quick. Let's have a look at the output. So it's giving me my client communication strategy. It's identified 4 segments. Then it's given some communication channels for young professionals. So it's got the communication channel, the frequency, the content type, as I'd asked for, in nice bullet points. Okay. Now, it's now asked, would I like a version formatted for a PDF handout or a slide deck? Often now, the updated models seem to suggest they're trying to guess actually what we would want from it. Now, if I was iterating on this, maybe I would like, so give me one example of a more detailed piece of content for each segment. So you can go back at these models. They have a memory of what happened. You don't have to put the message in and adapt it. They have a memory. And now it's giving me some more detailed content on what to give for these various segments. Okay. So at the next webinars, we're going to go through a lot more use cases and a lot more tools, but just starting off, has anyone got any questions about the basics of how you use these platforms?
I think a lot of advisors would like to put in client fact finds and get a suitability report out the other end.
Okay.
But that has big data protection issues.
Yes. Actually,
And,
Charlie, you go on.
well, is there a way around having to anonymize all the information, you know, change their address and change the date of birth and name and the policy numbers and then doing it?
Yes. So that is the kind of point where you would then look. I mean, you could anonymize it, but that's going to take a lot of time and there's risk that you miss some things. The enterprise licenses, so that if you buy certain licenses with your business, so Copilot Enterprise, ChatGPT offer an enterprise, they will offer security guarantees. Now, they will have a load of documentation on the security guarantees that they offer. You can, in terms of ChatGPT, they have their whole portal of documents about all of their compliance. And you can see they are GDPR compliant. However, I'll explain in a minute, the data actually does not remain in the UK. So despite being GDPR compliant, you also may have some data sovereignty queries and problems. Okay, so in answer to your question, Charlie, the first place that you would go if you're dealing with any client data is have a look at the terms and conditions of enterprise licenses, and then go from there. But do not go putting in client data into any real free platform, even though you can do things like turning retraining off. It won't be compliant. Okay. Now, moving on, and we do sort of touch on exactly what you said here, Charlie. So how do we work with these things safely? So what actually happens when you submit that prompt? When I submitted that message left my computer and it's likely to go to a server overseas. Unless actually using Microsoft Copilot, it may be going to a local server because of your agreement with Microsoft. But assume, unless you know, it is going to a server overseas. That prompt so it will go into the model and then it will come out the model giving me the suggestion on my client strategy. It is likely to be stored temporarily in my chat history. So actually, when I ask a follow-up question, it knew actually what I'd asked beforehand. So it is useful it being stored there. And also, if I want to go back to that same question tomorrow or next week, it will still be there. But also the platforms are using your conversation history to learn how to make these models better. And in some cases, definitely early on in 2023, and I'm pretty sure on the completely free platforms you don't register for, that data that you put in will actually be used to retrain the model. So there is a risk if you put a load of client data in that actually that gets embedded in the model and some cunning computer scientist may actually manage to ask the model a phrase in such a way that actually your data could be leaked out. Okay, so that is one of the things you have to be very cautious on if you're not paying for any of these platforms, because they're likely to be effectively you're paying in the fact that you're giving them free data to learn from. I think I've covered that here. So do have a look at the data retention and training policies, as some platforms will use it. Now, also consider the limitation of these models. These models, as we learned, have been trained on vast amounts of data from the internet. Most of the internet is complete rubbish, and they will pick up biases that are present in our historical data. So these are things like we may see the models exhibiting gender bias. There may be cultural preferences. If you enter a prompt in a certain language, you may get a different response relative to another language. Now, that is something to be aware of in certain contexts. The bigger issue, in my opinion, at the moment is that models can what's called hallucinate, or Microsoft say ungrounded responses. This is where they just make things up. These models actually try to give you a pleasing response. And if they don't really have the answer, they do have a tendency, it's getting less and less, but they can give you facts that aren't true. So if you are wanting to get factual information out of it, there are strategies to get around it, but do be aware these models can give you incorrect information. Also, the model is likely to be only as recent as the training data it's got given to it, which sometimes isn't actually that recent. It could be up till maybe 2024 or something like that. However, now they can actually access the web, so they can get access to recent information, but do be aware the main intelligence of the model may not have access to really recent data. Now, this point here, models can be overly sycophantic. This is becoming more and more of a problem as people try to use these models to get more of an idea, maybe brainstorming, get some opinions on their own thoughts and strategies. Often these models do have a tendency just to say that you're doing really good and it's a great job. So you would have to maybe prompt it to be a bit more critical if you were looking to use it as a thought partner to get some sort of reasonable constructive criticism of something you were doing. So be aware of that. And another thing to be aware of, all of these platforms have these things called guardrails. They're put in usually to try to keep us safe effectively and limit any unethical use. And in terms of maybe your context, they may prevent the model giving certain financial advice. Again, that is effectively to protect us. Okay, so that is just an overview of working with large language models safely. Now, I've talked about the importance of context in these large language models. Now, how can we add it? Well, we can just type content. We can type it into our ChatGPT window. But all of these providers now are making it so easy for us to be able to add context to improve the quality of our response. So up here in the top right, this is what Google Gemini's AI window looks like. And in terms of the context I can have, I can add things from my Google Calendar, from Google Tasks, my Gmail, Workspace, YouTube. All of this I can connect to and put it as part of my message. Okay, so maybe I'm looking to learn something and I know there's a good YouTube video. Well, actually, I can click on that YouTube, not YouTube Music, and bring the contents of that video in to help answer my question. Okay, here in Microsoft Copilot, if you have the paid enterprise license, you can actually have access to all of your company's data on SharePoint. So therefore, if you wanted to reference a certain file on SharePoint, you would just go / point to the document, and that document will be brought in as context to help you answer your prompt. Okay, and the same ChatGPT we can connect as well to OneDrive and SharePoint. So let's have a really quick look at why adding all this context is really useful. I'm just going to add some financial reports in. These are some pretty long financial reports. Let's have a look. So this is a company I used to actually work for. So Chemring, a defense company. I'm going to put their accounts data in, and this is 176 pages. And I'm going to put 3 years of their annual statement in. So if I just go back to my ChatGPT. There we go. I'm going to start a new chat because I don't want the history of the last chat. And if I click on here, add photos or files, I want just to add a file. And I've got 3 reports here. Hopefully my country internet won't be too slow. So we've got the annual reports from 2023, I think 2021 on there, and 2022. And that's about 600 pages, and they've all loaded. So now I can ask anything about those documents. So I want to be really clear to the model that I want all of the answers to be taken from the document. So only referencing the documentation uploaded. What was the change in profit across the years? So now the model is reading the documents very quick and very quickly from the data I'd given it. So I'm not relying on its training data, the things it may have learned from Reddit on the internet about what was going on in Chemring. I very quickly found out actually the profit after tax was 41.47 and it dropped to 5.4 million. It seemed to have some there's something to do with tax that went on in 2023. And these annual reports often contain lots of rich information about the company. So I could say, how have the challenges of Chemring changed over this period? Only use the uploaded documents to answer. I keep emphasizing only using the uploaded documents to answer because these models often do like to try to go out to the internet or use their own knowledge to help. So it talked about most companies having trouble in the 2021 period due to sort of COVID, supply chain strain and inflation. Yeah, that sounds about right for 2022. And geopolitics, definitely 2023 for a defense company. And we could ask lots of information that maybe we'd like to give to a client or help for our own strategy, and we could prepare various tables if we followed that prompt guidance on actually what kind of output we want. So that's a really quick example of how you can immediately make use of their huge, what's called a context window, the amount of words they can work with to answer your question, that can save you a lot of time. Any questions on adding context?
Just one question regarding the results you've got there on your example.
Yeah.
What level of confidence do you have that everything it says is 100% correct? And I'm speaking from experience now. So a very, very high level of confidence that you wouldn't have to go into there and check absolutely everything it says, or?
So it's a really good question. Definitely not. I would like to do almost some spot checks on it to start with. Now,
yeah.
I'm more of a computer programmer. So my sort of intuition for where I trust these models is more related actually to sort of, if it was giving me some code back, I would really have a feel for it. If you work with these documents day in, day out, you would kind of gain a better intuition, I think, on actually that seems about right. And often I say to people, when you're getting started with these models, give them documents that you know loads about anyway, and almost do your own spot because you know the answers, and then gain some confidence that way as to where they're good and where they're likely to hallucinate. But if there's anything that's really critical, you definitely have to fact check it. But yeah, get an intuition for yourself by doing it on documents that you know really well, and then you will build up, I guess, a level of trust that's appropriate for the task.
Yeah, thank you. That's sort of discussion with Charlie, I think, afterwards. I've had some experience now in AI and the way it interprets data given by financial advisors and the results, and I've found multitudes of errors which from a compliance perspective would have been an issue, but really picked up by the fact that we were checking every single document afterwards, not relying on what the AI was inputting. So we didn't actually find it too much help, to be honest, at this stage.
And certain workflows, that is going to be a problem. To be honest, that is really where I guess enterprise AI solutions, a lot of what you're getting is them doing the hard work with like doing sort of a model on top of a model and a cross check on top of another cross check to get this accuracy up, because that's the main thing that is effectively stopping AI really taking off, is that maybe 90% of the time it's right and that's not good enough. So
yeah,
really,
exactly.
really good point.
Thank you.
Okay, a little bit behind, so we've already talked about enterprise licenses. Approaching AI problems. I think this is a good slide to begin to end on. Get used to these platforms and always invite AI to the table if you're working on a new task. I think it was John who was just saying, so it's not good for this fact checking or something he was referring to. AI can be brilliant at some tasks and terrible at other tasks, and it's really hard to work out which one it will be. Charlie started off this call saying it doesn't seem to be very good at calculating the amount of cows he will have in 4 years, but at the same time, it's passing these international mathematics competitions. So I would always say, if you're starting off a new task, quickly put it through an AI model, if it's safe to do so, and see what the output is. It could be it's not very good, so therefore, for now, AI is not very good. However, for other tasks, actually, it could be effective, maybe drafting an email or something like that. There's a term reflexive AI use that's being put around now in certain companies. Your reflex is to see if AI can do it. You as the human assess if it's any good and move on. Okay. Always be that human in the loop. I think that was related as well to the conversation we were just having. Do not fully trust that AI. Use it for tasks. It comes back to you. You do your cross checks. You are responsible for it. Treat the AI to some degree like a human. The AI isn't going to do magical things. Treat it a bit like a very skilled intern. So if you want it to do a task, give it the information it needs to do the task. So all going back to that context. Okay, give it clear instructions. Give it actually how you want it output. Do you want it a CSV file? Do you want it a long Word report? Okay, so the easiest way sometimes to think about prompting, you can go online and get a guide on 100 ways to prompt, but more think, if I was talking to a new colleague on how to do something, what information would I give them? And that will probably do you quite well. And assume this is the AI, this is the worst AI that you'll ever use. It is getting better and better and better. And I talk to a lot of people who say, oh, I tried it on this and it didn't work. And you ask, when was that? Well, it was a year ago. Well, a lot happens in a year in AI. So just because it doesn't do it now, it may do it in 6 months' time. A new ChatGPT is coming out in August. Maybe it will do it then. Okay. Very quick summary. LLMs, large language models, freely available. Give them a go. Use them for appropriate problems. Experiment with that context. And your prompts to improve the response. Know your limitations, and we have touched upon that. And really just try to bring your AI to everything, at least to start with. Explore where it works in your workflow, in your business, and where it doesn't, and try to help it improve your efficiency there. Just finishing off, I've already talked about the future talks I'm planning with Charlie. These may change. I've got a feedback form I can put in the chat that I think has an option there if you are particularly interested in a certain area of AI. This agenda can change for the future. So do fill that in if you want to sort of steer where we go with this.
Good. I'll send around a link afterwards with and I'll put that in the link. So a link to if you want to listen to this again, CPD certificates, and for attendees, very straightforward thing. So I'll put the link in there as well, if anyone wants feedback.